there was someone that regularly would go with like Ozone acts, either for tours to sort of be a semi-tour manager or for special events or whatever to kind of be there. And that person either flaked or just wasn't able to do it. And Amici called me and was like, "Hey, Company Flow is going to play patriotism for the Ralph Nader campaign, and it's going to be at the Garden. Can you go and just be there to kind of guide them through the process of just getting in the building?" And he gave me whatever information I needed. And me, keep in mind, I'm 22 and I'm like walking these guys around, and like I don't remember if Amici ended up there at some point in the night or if I just needed to be there to get them in. I don't remember, but I remember, yeah, it was Madison Square Garden. I'm in the bowels of Madison Square Garden with L. Vast, who was there to do ad libs on stage, and Len, who was DJing. So Company Flow was still together in terms of L and Len. Just had left, maybe a year before that, if not longer. And yeah, I mean, we're walking around hobnobbing with like Eddie Vedder and like, you know, Tom York. Like after they got off the stage, I'll never forget this, like because everybody lit up when this shit happened. Because we were fucking, who the fuck were we? Who were they even? Like this is 2000, this is pre Cold Vein being released. And it was certainly pre Fantastic Damage being released. And it was just off the strength of Company Flow as a name, off of all the press that Funk Crusher Plus got, and then everything that came after that. And somehow, that's an Amici question, like how this came together. But yeah, I mean, I can remember, and they got off the stage. I'll get into the performance itself, but like they got off the stage, and Tom York is just walking by, and he just looks up with his face that everybody knows, and his accent that is obviously very heavy British that I can't replicate. But he was like, he saw L and Len and was like, Company Flow, I love you guys. And they just like walked off, and like and it just lit everybody up, like Vast too. And like everybody was like, wow, that was fucking Tom York that knew exactly who all these guys were. And that was really special. And like I think that he I think that L went in the back and like talked to those guys a little bit more. I think maybe that eventually is what led to him um getting to know like Trent Reznor a bit more, because Reznor was sort of a fan of his work too. At the time, how they ended up working together on a few things here and there. But yeah, I mean, to my mind, I mean, I don't know, some of those guys like Company Flow probably did some festivals and some other bigger shows where they interacted with some pretty big names. But to my mind, I think that was probably the first like genuine interaction that L and Company Flow and Def Jokes as a whole had with like a so worldwide celebrity name, where it was like, oh wow, like this is real. Like, people like Tom York and Trent Reznor and Eddie Vedder know who they are. Like, and it was pretty amazing for me to see, and be inspired by, this is what I came up around. Like for a long time, I thought to myself, like, maybe I'm expecting too much of this music shit. And to some degree, I guess I was, but what else did I know? You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
was very lucky to be at the center of these situations where boom, like I'm at Madison Square Garden, and like Tom York is walking by, shouting out the guy that I'm working for. So that was a big deal. And like, but they took the stage, they obviously did not have a full set. Not too many people did. Even like Eddie Vedder did like some acoustic stuff up there at a certain point. He did like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. But like, yeah, they came out, they did patriotism, left, right, the whole fucking, 25,000 people left, right. Like they did it because even though they didn't know the song per se, I mean, some people probably did because Ralph Nader was running a pretty youth driven campaign. But it was obviously an easy song to do as
Right.
a fan to pick up on. I mean, it was an easy song to pick up on, I should say. And you
That
know,
was the question I asked because that's pretty interesting. That makes for pretty interesting bedfellows, especially at that time.
mm,
Because Ralph Nader was like, for people that don't know, he was more of like an independent. Uh, uh, he ran his
yeah,
campaign more independently, and so like in that sense, I get it makes sense. But still, it's you have this like upper crust white guy that's running a
yeah. I mean,
campaign. That's
I
the
don't know if Ralph Nader was up here going like this. You know what I'm
right.
saying? But like, but you know, Ralph Nader was the Bernie Sanders of his time. You know, that was to take it back, like that was the Bush Gore election. That was 2000. You know, Ralph Nader was getting support from the youth that wanted something different. And while I think there's a huge difference between even, and I knew this going into the election, there's a huge difference between George W. Bush and Al Gore. There wasn't enough of a difference for some people, and Ralph Nader filled that gap. He did a lot of things under the Carter administration that, you know, like seatbelt laws that we still live with today. So he's an accomplished person. But I don't think there was ever a consideration of like, you know, we're too real to be at a political convention. You know, it was like it was no, it was like, oh, they want us to play the garden. Like, yeah, they're gonna do it. Like, so you know, that's how, and the performance went good, and you know, they're amped. You know, like Len got to spin in front of a stadium full of people, and Ellen Vast, you know, came out. Elle obviously did the verses, and Vast did the ad libs, and you know, was out there to help do the left, right. And I could still picture. I was on the side of the stage, so like you know, the stage at the Garden, you're basically on the floor, you know, and then you're looking up at the entire, like basically like a horseshoe around you of people
Mhm.
all the way up. So I've been there as a fan for basketball and probably for concerts, but I was there. I've also been there in a former life. I was like a sports producer, so I've also been on the floor for like Big East tournaments and shit. But I was also there before any of that happened. I was there with, that was the first time I was probably ever in the Garden, even before I went to a basketball game as a fan or something. Like I was probably the first time I was in the Garden, I was probably in the pit, like you know, doing this shit. And so that was a pretty cool experience. And yeah, so I was on the side of the stage by the steps, you know, and just there watching, you know, and like I, it's pretty amazing, you know. I mean, I think back and I'm like, you know, like a less mature person probably would have like bogarted their way onto the stage or some shit, you know what I mean? Like, but that wasn't in me, you know, and like I think to some degree I was not in this case specifically, but overall in my time with Jokes and with Ozone, like I was still and still am at my core to this day, despite appearances, you know, a shy person. But then I was a lot more so. And I had a lot of dedication to the music and what I wanted to do with it. But yeah, I don't know, man. It was amazing. It was, you know, looking back on it now, I'm really glad that I had that opportunity to be there for something so special. And like I said, I mean, it was never really a conversation about like whether it was appropriate to be at a political rally. I mean, obviously if it was a Bush rally, it would have been different. But um but yeah, I mean, with that said, I don't know. I can't recall like, you know, ever hearing Elle talk about Ralph Nader that much beforehand, you know? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like he was like a dedicated Nader supporter, but I think if he voted, he might have voted for Nader. Who knows? I mean, that would have been typical for people of our age group and mindset at the time, especially in New York, where everyone knew, even if you understood the implications of having a third party candidate in an election like that in New York, a lot of people were just like, "Who cares? It's not going to matter in New York." So that's the way people vote here. To this day, that's the way I hear people talk about how they vote for third party candidates in New York City or New York State, even. But yeah, it was a great time. I mean, you know, it's pretty amazing. But yeah, the Tom York thing stands out to me, you know, as a big deal. And I think that was a kind of an aha moment for L and probably for Michi and even for Vast, even though it wasn't his song, and for Len certainly too, like where it was like, oh wow, we're having like a severe impact, you know.
No, and to Tom York's credit, he to this day he still champions
Mm-hmm.
indie music and indie rap very heavily. So that's really cool. Like
Yeah.
that's not something that he did as just as a gesture. Like he
Yeah, no, you could tell he was sincere, just even in the interaction. I think L went and talked to him afterwards. I wasn't there for that, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I liked whatever these guys did just now. It was like, oh, I can't believe these guys are here. I didn't know anybody else knew who they were. Big up, you know. So like that, it was more that kind of vibe than the former. So